Oliver Kent wiped sweat from his brow with a crumpled paper towel as he crouched to pick up glitter-covered scenery scraps off the elementary school stage floor. The last of the parents had left 20 minutes ago, and the janitor hadn't shown again. Still, Oliver stayed because the school play mattered to his daughter, and that was enough reason. "Dad, you don't have to do all of it," Riley said, standing near the curtain with her backpack slung over her shoulder, her unicorn headband slightly askew from her earlier performance as a magical cloud. "I know, but we don't leave things messier than we found them, remember?" Oliver replied, giving her a tired smile. "Besides, your cloud costume shed more glitter than a disco ball," Riley giggled, then yawned and plopped down on the edge of the stage. Unseen by either of them, across the auditorium in the shadows of the back row, a woman in designer heels and a fitted navy coat stood, watching. Persephone Rhodes had stayed behind out of a sense of curiosity or maybe something deeper. Her son Roman had played the mischievous Sunbeam, and while she applauded politely like the other parents, it wasn't the play that had captured her attention. It was the quiet, rugged man who'd volunteered to help build the set, who always showed up early with his daughter and stayed late when no one else would. She hadn't meant to stay this long. But something about the way Oliver knelt to untangle a string of lights with care, the way he gently reminded his daughter to zip up her coat, stirred something in her chest she hadn't felt in years. She stepped down the aisle, her heels clicking softly. "Need a hand?" Oliver looked up, startled. Persephone had pinned her hair back and swapped her usual high-power Manhattan wardrobe for something more casual, but even now, under the dim stage lights, she looked like she walked out of a magazine cover. "Oh, no, it's fine, I've got it," Oliver said, brushing glitter from his jeans. "Just finishing up. You're Riley's dad, right?" she asked, extending a hand. "I'm Persephone Rhodes, Roman's mom." Oliver glanced at her hand, then shook it briefly, careful not to transfer glitter. "Oliver Kent, nice to officially meet you. Your daughter was adorable tonight," she added. "She really committed to being a cloud. She takes her weather roles very seriously," he said with a tired chuckle. Persephone crouched beside him, grabbing a handful of paper scraps. "You shouldn't be doing this alone." "I don't mind. The janitor's out sick again and someone's got to clean it up." She paused, glancing at him. His hands were rough, calloused. His flannel shirt had a tiny tear at the seam, but his eyes, those were kind, steady. "It's not your job, though," she said softly. Oliver shrugged. "Doesn't have to be, does it?" Persephone didn't say anything for a second. Then she pulled a bobby pin from her pocket and started untangling the fairy lights with him. "Well, if you're going to be noble, I'll at least make this go faster." Riley watched them with curious eyes. After a few minutes, she leaned toward Roman, who had wandered over from the gym and was now sitting beside her. "I think our parents are talking," Roman shrugged. "My mom never talks to anyone," Riley grinned. "She's talking now." By the time the stage was clean, Oliver stood and winced as his back cracked. "Thanks for the help," he said. "I appreciate it." Persephone nodded. "Do you always stay after school events like this?" "If I don't, no one really does," he said simply. Persephone hesitated, then asked, "Can I offer you a ride home?" Oliver blinked. "No, I'm good. Truck's in the lot." "Truck?" she asked, eyebrows lifting. "Yeah," he said with a sheepish smile. "It's old, but it runs." She smiled. Not a polite, practiced smile like the ones she gave at board meetings, but a real one. "Well," she said, brushing imaginary dust off her coat, "thank you for letting me help tonight." "Thanks for helping," he replied, watching her walk off with Roman. As they left, Riley tugged on his sleeve. "Dad, did you see how pretty Roman's mom is?" Oliver laughed. "Yeah, honey, I saw." But he didn't think much of it. A woman like that, she probably had a whole line of Wall Street types waiting for a dinner date. He was just a guy who fixed HVAC units during the day and packed his daughter's lunch at night. The next week, it happened again. After another school event, a parent-teacher meeting Oliver found himself picking up folding chairs while Riley colored in the corner. Most parents left right after their 5-minute chat with the teacher, but as he stacked the last of the chairs, a familiar voice spoke behind him. "Do you have a thing for cleaning up after school functions, or is this just your way of avoiding traffic?" He turned, surprised. "Persephone. I didn't think you'd still be here." I had a long chat with Mrs. Langston about Romans, creative use of glitter glue on math homework. She smiled. But then I saw you again doing this, so I figured I'd say hi. He rubbed the back of his neck. Old habits, I guess. Can I buy you a coffee sometime? She asked suddenly. He blinked. What? She shrugged, casual. You've helped build sets, clean up glitter disasters, and you somehow still smile through it. I think that deserves a coffee. Oliver looked down at his boots. You don't have to, I know I don't, she said, stepping closer, her voice dropping just a bit. But I want to, he met her eyes. There was no pity in them, just interest, warmth, curiosity. Yeah, okay, sure, he said, clearing his throat. Tomorrow morning, she offered. After drop-off, he nodded. There's a place around the corner from my job, not fancy, Persephone smiled. I like not fancy. As she walked out with Roman, Oliver turned and stared at the floor for a moment, then at Riley, who was grinning wide. You like her, she said matter-of-factly. I barely know her, Oliver muttered. But you smiled weird. That's your I like someone smile, he groaned. Don't start matchmaking, kid, but deep inside something unfamiliar flickered in his chest, hope, interest, maybe even something close to excitement. What he didn't know, what never even crossed his mind, was that Persephone Rhodes had a private driver waiting outside in a black Bentley, and that the coat she wore cost more than his rent. He didn't know she owned a Manhattan real estate empire and had her own floor in the Rhodes Tower. And he definitely didn't know she was already falling for him. The coffee shop sat on the corner of a quiet street, wedged between a laundromat and a discount pharmacy. It had no name on the door, just a faded open sign, and the scent of cinnamon and roasted beans curling out every time someone stepped through the creaky entrance. Oliver was already inside when Persephone arrived, seated at a window table with two mismatched mugs between them. He wore a windbreaker and jeans, his work boots laced loosely, flecks of old paint clinging to the soles. Persephone stepped in, scanning the room. The clientele was mostly blue-collar, older men reading newspapers, a woman grading papers, a delivery driver drinking from a thermos. She stood out instantly in a structured coat and slim trousers, but if she noticed, she didn't show it. You found it, Oliver said, standing slightly as she approached. I did, she replied, sliding into the chair across from him. Though I passed 3 espresso bars with valet parking to get here. He gave a short laugh. No valet here, but the coffee's strong and cheap. She looked down at the mug he'd placed before her. You remembered, I take it, black. That's either impressive or concerning. Just observant, he said, sipping from his own cup. She wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the steam rise into her face. It's rare to have a moment like this, just sitting, quiet. No meetings, no phone calls, no publicist telling me to soften my image. Oliver's brow furrowed. You have a publicist, she hesitated, then answered, yes, among other things. He nodded slowly, letting that sit. Well, I don't have one, but my daughter's been managing my wardrobe. Yesterday, she said my socks lacked emotional depth. Persephone laughed, genuine and bright. She's not wrong, those were aggressively beige. I was going for neutral, he said, leaning back. Didn't realize socks were a statement. They are if you're trying to impress someone, she said, then paused. Are you? He met her eyes. I hadn't thought about it, but maybe I should have. She didn't look away. Maybe you still can. Their coffee cooled, but neither reached for it. The air between them shifted, something unspoken anchoring them in place. After a pause, he asked, What do you actually do, Persephone? She took a breath. I run a real estate development firm. We focus on commercial properties, mostly in Manhattan. Sounds important, it is, and exhausting. And sometimes lonely. Oliver looked down at his hands. I don't know much about that world. I don't expect you to, she said quickly. And that's not a bad thing, he studied her. You don't talk like the people on those business shows. You're normal, she arched a brow. That might be the most radical compliment I've ever received. A bell above the door jingled as someone left, letting in a gust of cold air. Persephone pulled her coat tighter, then glanced outside. I have a meeting in an hour, she said reluctantly. But I'm glad I came. Me too, Oliver said, standing with her as they stepped outside. A sleek black sedan rolled to the curb, the driver hopping out to open the door. Oliver blinked, his jaw tightening slightly. Persephone turned to him. That's just logistics. Nothing more, right? He he said, nodding slowly. She touched his arm, light as breath. See you at pickup, he nodded again. Yeah, see you then. The door shut softly behind her, the car pulling away with barely a sound. Oliver shoved his hands in his pockets and stared down the street. Later that afternoon, as he waited near the playground gate, he noticed her arrive on foot, holding Roman's hand and laughing at something he said. She didn't glance at her phone once. Hi, she said, stopping beside him. Hey, I walked today, she offered, brushing hair back from her face. Felt like fresh air. He didn't respond right away. Then you don't have to explain yourself to me. I know, she said gently, but I want to. Riley ran up then, her backpack bouncing. Dad, Roman says his mom used to live in Italy. Oliver looked at Persephone. I did, she confirmed. Florence, for 3 years. And you came back, he asked, surprised. Eventually, she replied. But I think part of me stayed behind. The slower pace, the way people lingered over dinner, I miss that. I've never been out of the country, Oliver admitted. Never even had a passport. You should, she said quietly. The world's bigger than it seems. Riley and Roman darted off to the monkey bars. Oliver turned toward her. Why me? She looked at him, not blinking. Because you don't ask for anything, because you listen. Because you make me feel like I can breathe, he swallowed hard. I don't know what I'm doing here, Persephone. You don't have to, she said. Neither do I. They stood in silence, the wind tugging at leaves, children shouting in the distance. Something had begun, and they both knew it. But neither rushed it. As they walked their children home together, the sun dipped low behind the buildings, casting golden light across the sidewalk. They didn't reach for each other's hands, not yet, but the space between them was shrinking. The first time Oliver saw Persephone's apartment, he thought he had the wrong address. He climbed the steps of the pre-war brownstone she'd mentioned somewhere between the Upper West Side and a world he'd never set foot in and rang the bell. Riley's hand tucked tightly in his. The door opened to soft jazz playing in the background and a woman in house slippers greeting them with a tray of freshly baked madeleines. I think we're at the wrong place, he muttered, glancing down at the address on his phone. No, Persephone called from the hallway beyond, appearing in worn jeans and a linen shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow. You're in the right place. That's Gilda, my housekeeper. She's more punctual than the sunrise. Riley's eyes widened as they stepped inside. This place smells like cookies and flowers. Persephone smiled. That's because Gilda refuses to leave without baking something first. Oliver took in the tall ceilings, the crown molding, the antique light fixtures that somehow blended perfectly with the modern art on the walls. You live here. For now, she said lightly, leading them toward the kitchen. I keep a penthouse in Midtown, but this place is warmer. Roman prefers it. He paused near a sideboard where framed photographs sat black and white portraits, old European cityscapes, a picture of Persephone beside a man in a tuxedo. She noticed his gaze. My father. That was the last gala we attended before he passed, she said, her voice quiet. Oliver nodded. You were close. Yes, she answered. He taught me everything about business, about control, about not letting people see you bleed. He studied her for a moment. That must get lonely. It does, she said, then turned to Riley. Would you like to help Roman frost cupcakes? Riley beamed and followed her into the kitchen, leaving Oliver alone in a room that felt like a museum and a home all at once. Later, as the kids played in the sunroom upstairs, Persephone poured 2 glasses of wine and led Oliver to the rooftop garden. The city stretched out around them, endless windows glowing against the dusk. Is this the part where you tell me you're secretly royalty? He asked, eyeing the outdoor fireplace and ivy-draped pergola. No, she said, handing him a glass. Just a woman who's good at pretending everything's fine when she's exhausted. He sat beside her, careful not to spill. You don't seem like someone who gets tired. That's because I don't let anyone see it, she replied. I built an empire before I turned 35. I know how to negotiate billion-dollar deals and dismantle a boardroom in heels. But I still can't get Roman to eat anything green unless I bribe him with gelato. Oliver chuckled. Riley won't touch anything that casts a shadow on her plate. They both laughed, their wine untouched. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was easy, natural. I was married once, she said finally. Briefly. It didn't end badly, just quietly. He wanted someone who'd stay home and host brunches. I wanted someone who didn't flinch when I said I wanted to run my father's company. Oliver looked out over the city. I've never even been close to that world. I know, she said. That's why I'm not afraid with you, he turned to her. Afraid of what? Of being seen, she said, her voice lower now. Not as a CEO, not as someone who has to have the answer, just me. He set his glass down. You ever think about leaving it? She looked at him, startled. Leaving what? The pressure, the walls, the whole high-rise life. She inhaled slowly. Sometimes, but I've worked too hard to walk away. He nodded, understanding. Still. Doesn't mean you can't have something real, she studied him. What if I told you I wanted that? With you, he stiffened slightly. You barely know me. I know enough, she said. I know you show up. I know you fix things without being asked. I know you look at your daughter like she's your entire world. Oliver ran a hand through his hair. You say that now, but what happens when your world sees me? The guy who carries a toolbox and eats dinner from a microwave. Persephone leaned closer. Then they'll see the only man who's made me feel like I'm not performing. The rooftop lights flickered on, casting a soft glow over her face. Oliver couldn't look away. I don't fit here, he said quietly. Then let's find a place where we both do, she replied. From the open windows above, the sound of children's laughter drifted down. Riley and Roman were singing something off-key, stomping around like miniature tornadoes. Oliver shook his head. I should probably get her home. Persephone stood. Let me have Gilda pack something for you both. You're not leaving here hungry. He followed her back inside, not protesting. As she handed him a bag filled with neatly wrapped containers, he hesitated. I never expected this, he said. Any of it. She met his gaze. Neither did I. As he stepped into the hallway, Riley sleepy on his shoulder, Persephone reached out and touched his arm. Come back, she said softly. Not for dinner, just come back. He nodded once, then disappeared down the stairs. She closed the door slowly, her hand lingering on the knob. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone in the silence. Rain tapped against the windshield as Oliver pulled into the school parking lot, wipers dragging across the glass in slow rhythm. Riley sat in the back seat, humming softly to herself as she zipped up her hoodie, her boots swinging above the floor mat. He glanced at the rearview mirror, his mind elsewhere. You're quiet, Riley said, chewing on a piece of gum she'd stashed in her coat pocket. You only get quiet when you're thinking about big things. Oliver turned, forcing a smile. Just tired, kiddo, she tilted her head. Is it about Roman's mom? He hesitated. A little. Riley leaned forward. I like her. She listens when I talk and she laughs at your jokes. Even the bad ones. Oliver chuckled faintly. You think she laughs at my jokes? She laughed at the one about the plumber and the parrot. That was a terrible joke. I know, Riley said. That's how I knew she liked you. Before he could respond, the car door opened and Persephone ducked inside, her coat soaked at the shoulders. She shook the rain from her sleeves and gave them both a sheepish look. I was about to run in and grab you, Oliver said. I needed the air, she replied, breathless. And I didn't want to wait in the car alone. Riley reached up and handed her a napkin from the glove box. You're wet. Only on the outside, Persephone said with a grateful smile, dabbing her hairline. Oliver started the car again and pulled away from the curb. They drove in silence for a few blocks before Persephone spoke. I told Roman about my childhood this morning, about how my mother left when I was 8. How my father raised me in a house so big we could go days without seeing each other. Oliver glanced at her. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, but it felt right to tell him. I think I've been so focused on creating a life of power that I forgot how much I needed connection. Riley yawned in the backseat. Do you still have the big house? No, Persephone said, turning slightly. I sold it after my father passed. Oliver made a left onto a quieter street, the buildings growing shorter, the sidewalks more cracked. You never talk about him. There wasn't much to say, she replied. He believed in legacy, in appearances. He would have hated this car, but he would have admired your work ethic. Oliver smiled faintly. That's generous of him. Persephone exhaled, her gaze fixed on the blurred city lights. I've spent most of my life trying to be someone he'd respect. I think I forgot to ask what I wanted. Riley leaned her head against the window, her voice drowsy. "What do you want now?" Persephone looked at Oliver. "Something real. Something that doesn't care about boardrooms or quarterly earnings." He parked outside his building, a narrow walk-up with chipped railings and a flickering porch light. "Come up," he said, surprising himself. "You don't have to stay long. But I think there's something you should see." Persephone followed him and Riley up the stairs, her hand brushing the banister as they climbed. Inside, the apartment was small but warm. A few of Riley's drawings lined the fridge. A quilted blanket lay folded on the back of the couch. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and something deeper home. Oliver disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a dented shoebox. He set it on the coffee table and opened it slowly. Inside were old photos of him in overalls, holding a newborn Riley, of a younger man in uniform, smiling beside a woman with sunburned cheeks. "That's my brother and my sister-in-law," he said. "They passed when Riley was 2. I wasn't supposed to be the one left behind. But here we are." Persephone rested her hand on the edge of the box. "You raised her alone," he nodded. "I didn't know what I was doing, still don't, but I show up every day." She reached out and touched his wrist. "That's more than most." He looked at her. "You're not used to people being honest with you, are you? Not unless they want something." "I don't want anything from you." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why it scares me." He stepped closer. "I'm not something you have to manage, Persephone. I'm just a guy who cares about you." She searched his face. "I don't want to keep living in 2 different worlds." "Then don't. I've got meetings in Zurich next month, a summit in Singapore. My life isn't simple. And I've got a clogged drain in Mrs. Dunley's kitchen and a landlord who still thinks rent should be taped to his door," he said. "But I'll still be here if you want me." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I do." He stepped forward and kissed her, not rushed, not desperate, just sure. When they pulled apart, Riley clapped from the hallway, already wearing pajamas. "Finally," she said. "Can we have pancakes tomorrow to celebrate?" Persephone laughed, wiping at her eyes. "Only if you help me make them." "I make excellent chaos," Riley declared, spinning. Later that week, Persephone canceled her Zurich trip. She didn't make a speech about it. She just shifted her schedule, moved meetings to Zoom, and told Roman that he could sleep over at Riley's if her father agreed. He did. On a crisp Saturday morning, she stood beside Oliver at a neighborhood block party, holding a paper plate of barbecue and laughing as Riley and Roman chased balloons across the pavement. She wore jeans and sneakers, no makeup, her hair tucked into a baseball cap that read Kent HVAC. "I had these made," she said, handing him a second cap. He raised an eyebrow. "You put my business on a hat." "Marketing," she said. "Also, you're going to need 3 new vans." "I took the liberty of setting up a meeting with a small business investor." "I can't afford investors." "You won't have to. I'm not just a billionaire, I'm also your girlfriend. I believe in your work, and I have a spreadsheet to prove it." He laughed, shaking his head. "You're unbelievable." She leaned in. "I'm yours." They stayed until the sun dipped low and the string lights flickered on above the street, and when Riley fell asleep in Persephone's lap and Roman leaned into Oliver's side, neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. 2 different worlds had found a place in the same orbit, and for the first time in a long time, Persephone Rhodes didn't feel like she was falling. She felt like she'd landed right where she was meant to be, with him. Oliver stood still in the middle of the freshly painted workshop, staring at the polished oak sign above the entrance, Kent and Rhodes Home Restorations. His name next to hers. He rubbed his hands on his jeans, still stained from varnish, and stepped back to admire the finished space. The old warehouse had been gutted and rebuilt over the past 2 months, floor by floor. Persephone had insisted they keep the original brick walls and wide-paned windows. "It needs character," she'd said. "Like you." He'd argued at first, told her he didn't need a new space. But she'd looked at him like she always did, like she saw everything he was and everything he could be, and reminded him that it wasn't about needing. It was about deserving. The shop door creaked open. Persephone entered carrying 2 iced lemonades, her hair pulled into a low knot, and a pencil tucked behind her ear. She wore a soft cotton dress that swayed slightly with every step. "You left the lights on in the back," she said, handing him a drink. I wanted to see how the new glass pendant fixtures reflected off the floors, he replied, brushing a strand of sawdust from her shoulder. They reflect beautifully, she said, looking around. You built this from nothing. You helped, he said. I invested in it. You built it. He set the lemonade down, then pulled her gently into his arms. You sure you want your name on a place that smells like wood glue and damp cloth? Her lips curved. I signed my name on billion-dollar contracts that never meant a thing. This means something. They stood like that for a while, the quiet hum of the city seeping through the windows, the distant clatter of a train passing blocks away. I've been thinking, she said, her voice soft, about where we go next. Oliver arched a brow. We've got a business, 2 kids who insist on eating popsicles for breakfast, and a dog Riley found in the alley last week that I wasn't allowed to say no to. Isn't that enough for now? She rested her chin on his chest. I want to marry you, his breath caught. I don't mean someday, she added. I mean soon. I don't want a ballroom or 500 guests or a custom-embroidered aisle runner. I just want you, us, the kids, a few people we love, and a day that feels like home. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, really looked at her, and felt the ground beneath him shift into something solid. I didn't think I'd ever get this again, he murmured. Not after what happened with my brother. I thought my whole life was about holding on, surviving. You're allowed to have more than survival, she whispered. You're allowed to live. He kissed her, slow and sure, and when they pulled apart, he said, okay, let's do it. Let's get married. 3 weeks later, they stood under a canopy strung with fairy lights in the backyard of their new home, a quiet house with a wraparound porch, and a garden Riley and Roman had helped dig themselves. Persephone wore a pale blue dress, nothing extravagant, but when she walked out the door and into the yard, Oliver forgot to breathe. Roman held the rings. Riley threw petals with such enthusiasm they stuck to her shoes. Gilda cried through the entire ceremony. And when Oliver slid the simple gold band onto Persephone's finger, he whispered, "You changed everything." She responded with a smile that felt like sunrise. "You didn't need changing," she said. "You just needed someone to see you." After the cake was gone and the guests had gone home, they lay curled together on the porch swing, the kids asleep inside, the scent of jasmine floating on the breeze. Persephone traced her fingers along his forearm. "Do you ever think about how different we are, all the time?" he said. "And I still can't figure out how I got this lucky." She turned to face him fully. "You didn't get lucky, you earned this, every moment, every inch." He kissed her shoulder. "I still don't know how to live in your world." "Then we'll build our own," she said. "Something that doesn't belong to anyone else, just us." He nodded, pulling her closer. "Deal." Months passed and their rhythm only deepened. Oliver's business took off, with Persephone handling the branding and operations while he focused on the work he loved. She still kept her hand in her real estate firm on her own terms now, no longer beholden to boardroom expectations. Roman joined a robotics club. Riley learned to ride a bike without training wheels and declared that someday she'd be president, unless she decided to be a baker instead. They ate dinner together every night. Sometimes takeout, sometimes Gilda's cooking, sometimes grilled cheese made by Persephone in a pan she stubbornly refused to replace. One rainy afternoon, Oliver came home to find Persephone barefoot in the hallway, laughing as she tried to herd the dog away from a trail of muddy paw prints. She looked up, cheeks flushed, hair damp, and said, "Welcome home." He didn't say anything. He just stepped forward, wrapped his arms around her, and kissed her like it was the first time. Because even after everything, the glitter, the workshops, the rooftop confessions and the block parties and the whispered promises, every moment still felt brand new. And every day he chose her again, just as she chose him, forever.